You're watching The Legal Breakdown. So Trump's trial has wrapped for the day, and there was a major falling out between Trump's lawyer and the judge that we're going to talk about. But first, for those watching, Glenn and I are going to be covering this trial on a daily basis. So if you want to follow along with everything that happens, please make sure to subscribe. Okay, so Glenn, there was a pretty clear falling out already between Trump's lawyer, Todd Blanche, and Judge Merchan. And it happened during this long-awaited show cause hearing for Trump's 10 violations of his gag order. At one point, the judge even said that Blanche was losing all credibility. So in court speak, how bad is a phrase like that for a lawyer to be told in court?
You know, Brian, I would say that's an 11 on the reputational Richter scale. I know that sounds hyperbolic, but here's what I'd ask our viewers to do. Think about who in your life, whose opinion is most important to you. Maybe it's your spouse or your partner. Maybe it's your employer. Maybe it's your teacher or professor. If you're in school, if that person said to you, "You are losing all credibility with me," how would that make you feel? You know, a judge isn't necessarily involved in a personal relationship with lawyers, but when you have a judge criticize you openly, harshly in court, I have been on the receiving end, not of any kind of criticism that approaches a judge saying, you are losing all credibility with me. But I've had some judges lash out at me from time to time. I know how it makes me feel. Makes me, want to redouble my efforts to make sure I do better. Maybe that's the impact it will have on Todd Blanche, Donald Trump's lead attorney. But I think most criminal law practitioners can tell you it's like the death knell. It can impact the entire trial moving forward. If a judge loses respect for an attorney and the arguments they're making, such that the judge feels compelled to say, "You're losing your credibility with me," that really can color the entire rest of the trial.
Well, Glenn, could the argument be made that the Trump team doesn't actually care what the judge thinks? I mean, their defendant, their client, is attacking the judge every waking minute. He even attacked the judge in the immediate moments after the show cause hearing ended, and he violated his gag order 10 times.
I don't know these attorneys, but I have a very hard time believing they don't care. Listen, I think they're probably in a tough spot. Now, they put themselves in that spot, but they're in a tough spot between the judge and Donald Trump, because some of what Todd Blanche said in his opening statement was not very persuasive. Some of it wasn't even proper, and there were some objections made by the prosecution. Some of those objections were sustained. In other words, defense counsel, you're making improper statements to the jury in opening. That's not a good look. But they are stuck between the judge and their client. And Donald Trump is urging them to say and do all sorts of outlandish and probably improper things in court. Now, I don't have a lot of sympathy for them because they've put themselves in that position. And let me just add this, Brian. I talk to a lot of my friends and colleagues who are career prosecutors and career defense attorneys. What we all acknowledge is that everybody who's charged with a crime has a right to zealous representation under the Sixth Amendment. So we have rapists and murderers and folks who sexually abuse children. I handled cases like those as a prosecutor. All of those people are entitled to zealous representation. However, when you have a client who not only committed all these crimes against American democracy, but who continues to try to kill our democracy, who has said, if I go free, if I'm reelected, I will be a dictator on day one. That's a special kind of animal as a criminal defendant. And I do question how defense attorneys choose to represent somebody not because of the crimes they committed, but because the crimes they have told us they still want to commit, democracy-busting crimes. So I have relatively little sympathy for these attorneys because they are stuck between that rock and a hard place. They chose to put themselves there.
Yeah, I think that was really well said. Glenn, was there anything else that stuck out at you from this show cause hearing as the result of Donald Trump's 10 violations of his gag order?
Judge Merchan at the moment said he is going to reserve ruling, so we don't know if he's going to rule tomorrow or the next day or next week. I do think time is of the essence because we know Donald Trump can't help himself or won't help himself. He will continue to violate the gag order. He will continue to rack up counts of contempt. So I think now what we're all going to be waiting for is not only what is Judge Merchan's decision with respect to holding Donald Trump in criminal contempt. I believe he will. The big ticket issue is, what will the first sanction be? The first sanction is almost certainly going to be a fine, a penalty, money sanctions. And I think they talked about 10 counts of contempt, so that would be $1,000 per count, $10,000, which of course means nothing to Donald Trump. But what I'm really going to be keeping an eye out for is, what does Judge Merchan say to Donald Trump after he finds him in contempt and sanctions him? And I sure as heck hope what he says is, next time we're going to be looking at that 30-day jail sentence possibility that is authorized under the law. So keep it up, and I will make good on my promise to jail you. That's what I'm hoping we hear from Judge Merchan. Telling Donald Trump, you are now on notice, no more $1,000 fines.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, basically him not doing that and just leaving in place the ability for him to fine him $1,000 per violation is pretty much a runway for somebody who, at least on paper, or purports to be a billionaire. I mean, it's a clear runway to just commit those violations with impunity at this point. So if it's either these $1,000 fines or 30 days in jail, then there's a major disparity between the two. And if he just opts to keep imposing these $1,000 fines, it's basically like saying, go on, you've got carte blanche to do whatever you want.
It makes a mockery of court orders, because Donald Trump will continue to violate the gag order, and what he'll be communicating to Judge Merchan is, just put it on my tab. I can do this all day long.
Right. Glenn, why do you think that Judge Merchan didn't rule right away? As of this recording, we still don't have a resolution on this issue. He reserved judgment here.
I think part of it is, he got so frustrated with Todd Blanche, the defense attorney, because he kept asking him, listen, you're taking this position that this is not a violation of the gag order. Give me some case law, something, analogous case law. It doesn't obviously have to involve a former president violating a gag order. Give me something. And Todd Blanche wouldn't answer the question. Nothing will get a judge more agitated than an attorney who won't answer the question. Because if the answer is, there is no case law that's directly on point, there is no real analogous case law, but let me find some legal principles to argue. Todd Blanche had nothing, but he wouldn't even directly answer the question. What he ultimately said is, I just think it's obvious and self-evident, and that really seemed to bother, let me use the word bother, Judge Merchan, because I think in response to that, he said, you are losing all credibility with the court, and the court means the judge. I think Judge Merchan may go back to chambers this evening, may set his clerks on trying to find any case law that is at least instructive, that's relevant on the issue of, whether these circumstances constitute criminal contempt. I believe they do. And if so, is there any guidance on the kind of sanctions that have been imposed, not just in New York? You can look to other jurisdictions for what we call persuasive authority. There's controlling authority, that would be an appellate court opinion in New York, and then there's persuasive authority. How have other judges and other jurisdictions handled loosely comparable circumstances? That is what Judge Merchan might be doing right now, digging into that kind of case law, and then maybe tomorrow he takes the bench and he says, I'm ready to render my opinion.
Well, first of all, it's ridiculous that Judge Merchan has to do the job of Donald Trump's lawyers because they didn't come prepared with any case law to back up their case. And second of all, I think one of the claims that they were trying to make was that Donald Trump wasn't violating this gag order because he was quoting Jesse Waters. Well, first of all, him quoting Jesse Waters doesn't mean that he's just there's no loophole that says as long as you put quotes on somebody else's words and then you post them from your accounts that it doesn't count. You can't get a loophole around what this gag order is trying to say. And second of all, Donald Trump's attorney actually admitted that it wasn't even a direct quote. It was a manipulated quote because that would better serve what Donald Trump was trying to say. So either way you cut it, it doesn't help him here.
And I think another thing that frustrated Judge Merchan is Todd Blanche kept saying, well, he was responding to political attacks. So Judge Merchan said, okay, please show me the political attacks from, Stormy Daniels or from the jurors. Because remember, he was suggesting that, liberal moles were sneaking on the jury. That's pretty dang offensive to the whole criminal justice system and to jury service. And so Judge Merchan said, fine, you're making these arguments. Show me the tweets, the posts, the information that represent political attacks he was responding to. And the defense attorneys had nothing. You don't make an argument to the court if you don't have something to back it up. For gosh sakes, do your homework.
Yeah, and I think that's the fatal flaw of like the whole Trumpian argument kind of finding its way into the courtroom, because while Donald Trump can make these outlandish claims on Fox News or on Truth Social and nobody's there to rebut anything, when you're actually in front of a judge and you don't have to live in this alternate universe, this parallel universe, the upside down, and you actually have to answer for the things you say, it doesn't work out so well for these people. Glenn, if the defendant to that point wasn't Donald Trump, what would have happened to a regular guy who defied a gag order once, much less 10 times?
He would have been promptly fined the first time, and he would have been jailed the second time. Donald Trump has racked up at least 10 criminal contempts for which he has not been held accountable, even with a fine. So, yes, the entire system is bending over backwards, catering to Donald Trump, treating him as they would treat no other defendant, and in the process sacrificing the safety of everybody else, witnesses, jurors, prosecutors, judges, and their respective family members. So, yeah, if it wasn't Donald Trump, this person would have been jailed long ago and would probably be in pretrial detention for the entirety of the trial.
Now, moving on to the second half of this trial day, David Pecker was on the stand. Is there anything that stuck out at you from that testimony?
Yeah, so first of all, we've only scratched the surface of David Pecker's testimony. He is still on what's called direct examination. When you put a witness up, like a prosecution witness, that is the prosecutor conducting direct examination. Once you're done your initial round of questions, you tender the witness, you give them over to the defense for cross-examination, and after that, you get to do a little cleanup in what we call direct examination. We're still early on in David Pecker's testimony. It's direct examination, and he has just started to talk about the catch and kill scheme, the crooked little arrangement he had with Donald Trump to do three things. One, to publish positive stories about Donald Trump. Two, to publish negative stories about Donald Trump's opponents. Will anybody forget the National Enquirer headline that Ted Cruz's father somehow had something to do with the Kennedy assassination? Yeah. I don't know if Martians were also involved, but this is the stuff of David Pecker agreeing with Donald Trump to run negative stories about his opponents. And then the third thing, which is really the most damning and what we're going to hear much more about, is he agreed to be the eyes and ears of Donald Trump and to catch and kill stories, prevent them from being published, essentially to help Donald Trump in the political arena, because Donald Trump had announced his candidacy to be president. And so we heard a little bit about a meeting at Trump Tower, for example, between who? David Pecker, Donald Trump, Mark Cohen, and we've heard that Hope Hicks was in and out of the meeting. I can't wait for Hope Hicks' testimony because she has been completely sort of under the radar. We don't know exactly what she's going to provide, particularly by way of direct conversations with Donald Trump. But, once she hits the stand, I would say hold on tight because that could be some real blockbuster testimony. The other thing I wanted to mention in David Pecker's testimony was that he said Donald Trump is very detail-oriented. I would almost call him a micromanager. That does not really support one of the things Todd Blanche said in his opening statement on behalf of Donald Trump, which is that Donald Trump was basically just, I'm going to paraphrase here, this sort of, uninvolved imbecile in the dark all the time. And he was just writing, get this, these $30,000 checks on his personal checking account over and over and over and over and over and over again to the tune of $420,000 and just giving them to Michael Cohen for goodness knows what. David Pecker kind of laid to rest that Donald Trump just didn't know what was going on here, didn't know what he was doing when he was signing $30,000 check one after another. So David Pecker is going to hurt Donald Trump in a lot of ways. And as I say, his direct examination has only just begun.
And that was actually my last question here is, in what way can Pecker's testimony be the most damaging to Trump? In what way is the Trump team most afraid of what David Pecker can do?
So here is how it will hurt Trump the most. It's going to dovetail with the testimony of who? Michael Cohen. And Michael Cohen's credibility is pretty poor, given that he's a convicted felon and he's lied in the past, although he lied several times over to protect Donald Trump, to keep him out of hot water, to try to save the boss's butt. So, you can kind of turn those lies from weaknesses into strengths. And I would argue all day long, guess what? If I had to pick a witness, I wouldn't pick Michael Cohen, but I didn't pick the witness. Donald Trump chose to engage in this corrupt and ultimately criminal scheme with Michael Cohen. So, ladies and gentlemen, of course, we will present Michael Cohen to you because that's Donald Trump's man and former attorney and fixer. And the fact that Donald Trump has been going after Michael Cohen, going after him like gangbusters for years, when David Pecker, who Donald Trump has not spoken one critical word of, says, oh yeah, I was talking with Michael Cohen and we agreed to do X, Y, and Z on behalf of Donald Trump, and I had conversations with Donald Trump about some of these things, what it does is it bolsters Michael Cohen's credibility. It corroborates him, so the jury will not have to believe Michael Cohen in isolation, in a vacuum. They're going to say, well, David Pecker said the exact same thing, and he really didn't have his credibility attacked. So it's not hard for us to accept the testimony of Michael Cohen when it dovetails with what David Pecker testified to. That is part of the power of Pecker's testimony.
Right, and I think that's especially important because Donald Trump's team is relying so heavily right now on conveying this idea that Michael Cohen is by no means a credible witness. And so this would kind of completely undermine their ability to convey that message to the jury. Of course, we will stay on top of the rest of this trial as it continues to play itself out. So for those watching right now, if you want to follow along with our comprehensive coverage, please make sure to subscribe to both of our channels. The links are right here on this screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.